All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with my best friend, Jamie Weinstein. Jamie, how's it going?
It's going wonderful, Matt. It's always great to be on your show, but especially wonderful in this very low key political environment.
Yes, yes, yes. And what's life like in LA? You're on the left coast now, and I can fantasize about it because you can watch a World Series game that ends at 8 p.m., and you could probably watch a presidential election where there's at least a chance you will know the result before you go to bed.
Well, more likely I'll be watching the presidential election than a baseball game. I don't really watch baseball, but I kind of wish I do now. Is that the Dodgers, the hometown team, is doing well. I do watch boxing, so that is very useful to watch a match at 8 as opposed to 11. It's awesome out here, and one of the great aspects of it, in a way, is that I could do this podcast with you. I could do my podcast at the Dispatch, get into politics, but like then be away from it. It's like almost like no matter what I say or do, no one else really is paying attention. To the extent that we have some friends that are kind of interested in this stuff, like they're not like paying attention to the day to day. That you're really removed from it unless you're doing what we do.
It's
So
got to be
it's awesome.
good for the soul, and you're out of the bubble, and probably good as an analyst to not be in the bubble. So
Yeah, when I'm sitting in Malibu at the coffee shop, it really helps me become the
yeah,
analyst I
real,
should.
real America, right? Real, you're in touch with the average person out there. But no, it is different though than being like in the DC
For sure,
swamp. So
definitely.
well, here we are, just days away from the election. I mean, it's one of those things where it feels like a million. We've been in this for a million years, but we've got a long slog ahead. Let's just go broad. I mean, where do you think we are? Any insight? Any predictions?
Um, well, I think the person who gets the most votes on election day will probably be the victor.
Yes, maybe
Um,
not though.
yeah, maybe
Actually,
not.
actually,
Oh,
probably
you're
not.
right. Fair
Maybe
enough.
not.
Most electoral votes on election day will probably be the victor. And the truth is, I have no idea. Honestly, I won't venture a guess on who's going to win the election. I think it could be blowouts either way. Although I guess maybe some people say it's unlikely for a blowout win for Kamala Harris. You got to be very careful how you say the name. Like that's the biggest criticisms I get, and I don't do it intentionally. Is like so I try to say the vice president. Like she's maybe not able to do a blowout, but I don't know. Maybe it could go any way though. Close election either way, blowout either way.
Yeah,
I have no idea what's going to happen.
I think she could win all 7 swing states. He could win all 7, or it could come down to Pennsylvania, your original home state. So it's crazy, and of course, I think there's a chance that it could get ugly, that there could be a lot of lawyers involved in disputes, and maybe, God forbid, violence. So
Do you see
it's
violence though? I guess I'm more optimistic. Like you see all these speeches from Trump and Tucker and all these people, but I don't see like people mobile. I guess I wouldn't see it here in California, but I don't know. I haven't seen like the Proud Boys, like roaming the streets anywhere and saying that we're gonna we're gonna start a civil war if we lose. I'm not seeing violence. I hope
well,
not.
no, I don't think I
Not seeing.
agree with you. I don't think it would be like spontaneous on election night. But what Trump did last time is he sent out this tweet summoning people to Washington D.C. on January 6th, and so that's the danger. Is it's I don't think it's immediate. I think it's that it's a contested election, and then at some
Possible.
point,
Let me just say, I think it's less likely this time for a couple of reasons. One is there are a lot of people in jail that might have been there at who got called out. There's a lot of people that saw people get sent to jail that don't want to probably be sent to jail. So, like the idea that ordinary people from all these states are going to come, I'm not so sure they're going to do that, especially when they don't have a president who can pardon them. At least there was a theory that the president would remain and they could be pardoned. And by the way, if you thought they rigged the election last time when they weren't in power, like why even compete? Like, of course, like they're going to win this time. I mean, if that was your
yeah,
view,
just give it up.
why would you be even surprised at who wins when they actually have the levers of power? So I don't know. I don't. I hope not, and I don't. And I think not. But we'll see.
Imagine the surprise when the vice president gets to decide who won the election.
Yeah.
That's going to be great, right? So we've had this. Obviously, there've been 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump's life. The sort of really super scary one, obviously, being in Pennsylvania this summer. There was a lot of talk about heated rhetoric. And yet we have seen repeatedly Donald Trump talk about the enemy within, um, talking about people being garbage and trash. Joe Biden, getting in on the act, I think unwisely there. And the latest is, I'll play you this clip, Jamie, and then you can tell me what you make of it. But this is Donald Trump talking to our former boss, Tucker Carlson, about Liz Cheney. And here's what he had to say.
And I don't blame him for sticking with his daughter, but his daughter is a very dumb individual, very dumb. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face.
When the guns are trained on her face. Now, people took that to mean that she should be, that she should be like taken out. What's the term I'm looking for here? A firing.
A firing squad.
Firing squad, that would be the term. But other people say, no, this is like the chicken hawk thing. They're saying, like, if she wants war so bad, let's let her go off to battle. But what do you think?
Look, there is so much to go after. In fact, he said that she should be, I think, tried at one point for treason, Liz Cheney. There's so much real, clear stuff, or at least pretty clear stuff, to go after. I don't like going after things like this, which, I think it's the graphic use of like the guns pointed at her face. But in the context of what he was saying, he said it was the chicken hawk thing. Stupid to begin with, I think. But there's real stuff that Trump says and threatens that he will do that we can focus on. And I think when you focus on some of, maybe this to a lesser degree because it was, martial in nature, but there's the bloodbath quote about like the car industry. There's a million of these quotes that, maybe if you really do some type of interpretation, you think it could be worse. But there's so much to focus on that is real, that I think it's a real mistake to focus on things like this because it undermines your overall point about his really dangerous rhetoric that does exist. And now people can say, well, no, look, you just keep making it up. But this is.
I agree with that. However, I would say because Trump says so many horrible things, it's hard to give him the benefit of the doubt. So if you see the media say he said it, you're inclined to say, oh, that sounds like something he would say. Not, you're not going to be like, that's not the Donald Trump I know. And then the second thing is, and I think this is Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because they speak in such weird language and Donald Trump is so discursive that trying to actually parse what he actually said or meant to say is like trying to, nail Jell-O to the wall.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm not saying that it has to be like clear as day what he's saying. I do think that authoritarians often speak in ways that aren't clear intentionally sometimes, that you can have more than one meaning. So you can go to say, no, he didn't mean this, he meant this, but there's like a secondary meaning. I do think listening to this in context, again, the face thing, I did not like the way it just became gruesome. I would not have made this the focal point of the attacks on the language he is using. On the other hand, I will make one interesting point. If you listen to that whole thing, it just shows you the bizarreness of Trump's mind. He and Tucker talking, and it's like, Cheney's a disaster. Cheney's father, the Dick Cheney, he's also horrible. He lost all these words. But then, as he starts doing the weave, I guess, he starts talking about how Dick Cheney called him and he pardoned Stuart Libby, and he thought that Dick Cheney was going to support him. I was like, actually, I'm surprised he didn't support me. Like almost like he wanted his support. He just called him a disaster, and everything he's done is a disaster. But now seems to think like he wanted his support. So I mean, you're a disaster only if you don't support him, is basically what Trump's view is.
Yeah, he's so transactional. And look, he didn't have any problem with Liz Cheney. If Liz Cheney had gone along with the, election denial and after January 6th, then she would probably be like the Speaker of the House right now, and Trump would be fine with it. So I don't think Trump cared about her being a warmonger back when she was supporting him. But now that she's not supporting him, then we can't have any of them warmongers around. So Tucker, we should talk Tucker. You and I both worked for Tucker. I worked for him for 6 years. You might have been even even longer. And you used to engage him in a lot more debates. I had my little office. I would go back, shut the door, and hide out, and you would oftentimes engage. So I'm going to play you. I can't play the whole thing, but this is a snippet of this video that is going around. I'll stop it a couple times because I want to get your take on this. But this is an interesting interview.
Do you think the presence of evil is kickstarting people to wonder about the good?
That's what happened to me.
That's what happened to you?
Oh yeah, I had a direct experience with it.
In the milieu of journalism, or just
Nope, in my bed at night, and I got attacked while I was asleep.
I want to point something out. So this is Tucker lighting. If you're listening, you won't capture this. This is a movie, almost movie quality. And so they got Tucker to like actually act things out. Somebody asked him like, light these candles for cinematic effect, right? I mean, that's my first thought here.
Experience with it.
in the milieu of journalism, or just
Nope, in my bed at night, and I got attacked while I was asleep with my wife and 4 dogs in the bed and mauled. Physically mauled.
in a spiritual attack by a demon?
Do you think that's his house in Maine? That
No,
they're
it's not.
showing?
I mean, that might be a cabin here somewhere, but I've been to his house in Maine. That is not the main island house.
I wonder if that's even his house, but anyway. Even if it's even a cabin that he owns, or if it's just like a set somewhere, I don't know.
Physically mauled.
I think he has.
In a spiritual attack by a demon?
Yeah, by a demon. Or by something unseen that left
Is that right?
claw marks on my sides, on my...
So he left physical mark.
Oh, they're still there. Yeah. A year and a half ago.
Was your wife terrified? I know you were.
I wasn't. I was totally confused. I woke up and couldn't breathe, and I thought I was going to suffocate, and I walked around outside, and then I walked in, and my wife and dogs had not woken up, and they're very light sleepers. And then I had these terrible pains on my rib cage and on my shoulder, and I was just in my boxer shorts, and I went and flipped on the light in the bathroom, and I had 4 claw marks on either side underneath my arms and on my left shoulder, and they're bleeding.
Wait, they were bleeding.
They're bleeding, yeah. No, they're actual claw marks. And I sleep on my side, so I wasn't clawing myself. I don't have long nails. And they didn't fit my hands anyway. But yeah, that happened.
So that's just an excerpt. He claims that a demon attacked him while he was sleeping and left claw marks. Anyone who has done, like, I wouldn't have noticed this before I got involved in doing TV, but like, if you're watching that video while Tucker's being interviewed, but then there's like B-roll of him. So there had to have been people who brought lights and cameras in, and he's like acting things out. This is a whole production. I don't know if that undermines the story, but what do you make of that, that story, Jamie?
Well, he goes on actually to say that he recommitted to reading the Bible after this, and he didn't want to read with any annotations or interpretations. Now, I'm not a biblical scholar. I wish I was more, but anyone who knows the Bible knows that it wasn't originally written in English. So if you really like, I would imagine these interpretations sometimes help understanding the translation of why it was translated this way and not another way. So it seems like those annotations are probably relevant and not easily dismissible as he did in that. 2 is, look, I think there's a religious realm. I call me crazy. I won't discount the possibility of demons. But what are the fruits that went out after this? Like, what is the timeline here? From what I can understand, the timeline is that he gets mauled by the demon, recommits to religion, brings on a guy who claimed Obama's gay and had gay sex with him that no one believed, decided to downplay the October 7th attacks and like call Jews American Jews who cared about it emotional, that they cared about the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. Went to Putin's Russia and like claimed it was awesome. Like, I don't know, that doesn't seem the fruits of someone who like became really delved. I mean, I don't buy it based on the fruits of it, because what he's done since then has been so toxic, I think, to the country, and political discourse, that it's not the fruits of someone like trying to delve and be a better man, more religious man. It's not
Yeah.
the fruits of what I would think someone
It's like, who's Katy Perry's ex-husband or boyfriend
yeah,
or whatever?
yeah, the guy who's on tour doing the same,
That guy.
yeah.
And Kanye too, right? When Kanye does like a gospel album. If they have a religious experience that leads them to conversion or to recommitting to like reading the Bible and stuff, and then they go out and the next move is they start Habitat for Humanity and they start being kind to people and they start building houses for the homeless or whatever, like then you could say like, look, we're all sinners, they're probably going to make mistakes, but at least they're trying to like change or but if the next move is, I don't know, something weird, then it makes you question the sincerity of it.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but I thought Jesus said, give to Caesar what Caesar is, and to God what's God. He didn't say like become a political activist and campaign for political office. I mean, what Tucker's done is he decided to paint entire political movement that opposes him as evil and demonic, which he has done. But only those who support him and his side as it's I'm not saying the fruits of this new religious experience, and it's almost demagogic to what he's doing here. It's almost like Tucker always says these days. He'll say a point and he goes, "It's obviously it's obviously true," or like obviously. And anytime he says that these days, it's almost always not true and definitely false. So
that's his version of they came up to me with tears in their eyes and said, "Sir."
I'm a little bit skeptical of this. I don't know what he's doing here, but I am skeptical, and I don't think I'm the only person who knows him who's deeply skeptical of. By the way, are there pictures? Like, can we see the pictures? Do you think like you would have taken pictures of the hallmarks?
The only thing I would push back a little bit on, and I do, the render unto Caesar thing. I do believe there are people like William Wilberforce who had a kind of a spiritual awakening, and he was already a politician, a member of parliament, and then he had this spiritual awakening, and he thought about leaving politics, but instead he devoted his life to ending the slave trade in Great Britain. I'm willing to believe.
What is Tucker's mission here? What is the cause that he is entering politics to do? I don't exactly see an issue that he is fighting for. I mean, I know there's issues he supports. Is it to stop illegal immigration? Is that? I mean, that's not exactly ending slave trade.
No, I'm not drawing a moral equivalent between Wilberforce or MLK and Tucker. So look, I mean, this is probably won't go anywhere because people ask me all the time, what happened to Tucker? And I think you and I have had this conversation, and I don't think anyone really knows, but I have to ask since people are listening, this is out of character, right? Like you wouldn't have expected him to tell you this story 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that seem familiar with Tucker. Sometimes you see like the old Tucker in certain ways, but there's definitely something not the same. And I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. I mean, there's a parlor game in DC of people that knew Tucker that email and text and like, you question what happened. Is this a mental break? Is it grifting? I raised the possibility of performance art. I remember when I published The Lizard King, which was this fake satirical novel that he helped me and Will Ron get published. He would always talk about this like I can't remember the name of the book. And if someone listening out there remembers it, must have been the 60s or 70s. I think it had to do with housewives. Someone wrote a book about the secret lives of housewives, maybe, but it was totally fake. Maybe they like claimed that they interviewed people. So maybe this is a grand performance art and for a decade. And we're going to find out in this great project at the end that, all these he calling all the people that supported him dopes. That can you really believe that they supported me for saying these things? I don't know. I don't have the answer. It makes me sad. I mean, Tucker is probably one of the more fun people to interact with. There's no one more fun to have dinner with. At least there wasn't. The political actor that I see as someone, I mean, I think he says that he would laugh at the idea of him engaging in supporting a candidate and giving speeches for a candidate 10 years ago. But the person I see now, who I think is become an extremely toxic force in politics, is not quite the person that I once knew.
You've been doing great work at the Dispatch. I love your podcast. They almost always come out on Mondays. And here, leading up to the election, you had David Frum kind of make the never Trump conservative case, the case for supporting Kamala Harris if you're a conservative, actually. And then you had Hugh Hewitt on I know you had a hard time trying to get someone who would come on the Dispatch and make the conservative case for Trump. You ended up getting Hugh Hewitt. I listened to it, but first, why don't you tell us how you got him, how you landed on him, and what you thought of the interview?
Well, I did. I had to. We come out on Mondays. This one episode did not come out on Monday. I probably reached out to 12 different people. I really wanted to get a strong case. Some of it was scheduling issues for people. Maybe sometimes you think it's scheduling and they just don't want to do it. Some people didn't respond, who I knew. There was at least one person who said that he doesn't want to do it because if he started doing it, he'd probably change his mind midway through supporting Trump. So he didn't have to lay out the explanation because he goes back and forth. But Hugh was one of my top choices. He's also someone I've known for a long time. I think I first met him on the set of Hannity. We were both on the Great American Panel, and I used to guest host his radio show after that.
Me too.
You did as well.
I haven't been invited back in a while, though. It's been
since the 2016 election. The last one I guest hosted, I think it was the day of the Indiana primary in 2016 when Ted Cruz lost to Trump. I think he lost to Trump. Look that up. But whatever it was, I believe it ended.
I think basically. He did, even though Mike Pence had endorsed Ted Cruz, right?
Yeah, and I think that basically ended the primary race, and also my guest hosting career. But Hugh's a really smart guy. I wonder sometimes if he really, because remember there was this turn in 2016. It was I think after. I want to say after the locker room, or not the locker room talk. That's what the excuse was, but the grab him by the what.
Yeah, Access Hollywood video.
Yeah, I think he turned on him and told it. Oh, no. And it might have been Judge Curry or the judge he made. For some reason, in the last 3 weeks of the race, Hugh rescinded his endorsement and told him to drop out of the race. But then very quickly, he decided that, he made up with the judge or something, which is not exactly true. And he came back and endorsed Trump. And then from that point on has supported him. But I do wonder deep down if he really does support him. But so we had this.
Yeah. So part of, I listened to it. Everyone should go listen. Jamie's one of the best interviewers, maybe the best interviewer out there. Everyone should listen to these Dispatch podcasts. The one with Hugh put a lot of stock into look, the guy, I've known a lot of construction, whatever, magnates, or he's a builder or whatever. He put a lot of stock in that. Talk about that, because I felt like Hugh felt like this is a type of person and they're all bluster. They talk, but then they don't actually do Hugh's best argument for Trump is that he won't do what he says he's going to do. Right.
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned on the podcast, I think he's relying on the fact that his best friend is in line for Secretary of State or another big job. He was his national security advisor, Ryan C. O'Brien, his last national security advisor. And somehow Robert C. O'Brien, I mentioned this, it feels like Hugh's depending on Robert C. O'Brien to guide Trump. And I don't know if Robert C. O'Brien is this Trump whisperer. It doesn't, I'm not aware, and maybe he was, but Tucker seems to be a much more significant Tucker whisperer than Robert C. O'Brien. Yeah, I mean, I think Hugh's point with the developers, that developers always over talk and exaggerate, and can't. But Trump tried to do some of this stuff. He wanted to supposedly bring back some members of the military and try and court-martial them after he was criticized by them, and he was prevented. There was a series of episodes that people reported on where he tried to do that. So I don't quite get why. I don't. I'm not upset about Trump's bluster. I actually think it's good. Here's what I should have said to Hugh. I think that to the extent that Trump's bluster talks about how great America can be and will be, and helps push the economy forward and gives us like the energy to be a great country again, that is good. I don't mind that, but that's different than saying someone's committing treason and we should put them in jail and things like that. That type of bluster.
Or we should shut down CBS, or that, the Pelosi's are the enemy within. And so maybe, again, it's hard to tell if what Trump says, he says, but maybe we should sick the military or the National Guard on them. He says a lot of,
maybe a little tangential, but I do think it's a worthwhile point, is that, I think most people were upset about the attempted assassination about Trump. I don't remember anyone in public, and maybe I'm wrong, making fun of it or suggesting it was good or bad. When Nancy Pelosi,
Jack Black's partner.
Okay, well, Tenacious D, I'm not sure they're as relevant. I do remember when Nancy Pelosi's husband was almost killed by somebody. That's like a national joke, according to Trump. So,
I think the guy just got life in prison for that. He hit him with a hammer.
Yeah. So, and he was going for Nancy Pelosi. He was going for Nancy Pelosi. And by the way, this might lead into your next point of the interview. Trump said when his vice president was under assault at the Capitol, with the 3 hours he sat in his hands in the Oval, next to the Oval Office on January 6th. So what? So, that I do think is something worth remembering.
When Obama ran for president, like in 2016, I think it was, there was all this talk about, he can give these speeches, but he doesn't really have any experience, and these lofty speeches and all that. And he borrowed a line from Deval Patrick, where Obama, you might remember, he said something like, we hold these truths to be self-evident, just words. And he went through all these great, I don't know if he did tear down this wall, but he did great speeches. He would say, just words, just rhetoric, just talk. And I think Obama was right. Words matter. Winston Churchill took the English language and sent it off to battle, or whatever that quote is, in the beginning was the word, Jesus said to the fig tree, dry up. Words matter. Words are powerful. And I think that, when Obama said that, don't tell me words don't matter. I think it's true when it comes to Donald Trump. He says bad, horrible things, and I think they matter, especially coming from a president. And for someone like Hugh to just that's just Trump being Trump. Are you going to make that? Can I go talking shit? Everyone's going to that's just Matt being Matt. I don't think anybody else gets away with this except Donald.
I don't think so either. And, speaking of my interview with Hugh, I mean, there's two moments that, to me, I'd say three actually, that kind of revealed the weakness of his argument. One of them was the catastrophizing Kamala Harris. That it's not just she'll be bad. This is going to be the worst in the history. Nothing's going to be worse. We've never had a worse leader, and we'll be destroyed. I mean, you have to build up the threat of who the vice president will be to the point where you're so scared. I'm not a huge fan of her policies probably, but it doesn't seem to be that enormous threat that he's making. So that seemed to indicate weakness to me. And then I brought up two what I thought were really important parts of the Trump's record. One is on January 6th, as I mentioned, for 3 hours. You don't have to believe that he wanted what January 6th to happen. You don't have to believe almost anything. Just in isolation, this is disqualifying, in my opinion, which is that he sat next to the Oval Office in the dining room, put on the TV, And for 3 hours, while the Capitol was being attacked, he did almost nothing. He put out a couple tweets. Some were worse than not putting out a tweet at all. He was begged to do something. He didn't. When he was told about his vice president being whisked away, he said, "So what?" When Kevin McCarthy called and said, they're effing trying to kill me, he said, "Well, maybe they care more about the election than you do, Kevin." For 3 hours, he put his feelings above the safety of the Capitol and the people within it. And that in and of itself is disqualifying. And Hugh's response to that was, any evidence from January 6th, for some legal reason, this is not court. He's on a podcast.
It was because the January 6th committee did not allow Kevin McCarthy picked Republicans to be on the committee who were election deniers.
Yeah, but this is not a court of law. Yeah, like we're talking, like there are witnesses that have said this, that are Republican witnesses, friends of these are Trump supporters who said this that occurred.
Hugh's point was, because Nancy Pelosi would not allow the Republicans that Kevin McCarthy assigned to be on the January 6th committee, therefore any information or evidence that they uncover is inadmissible in the court of public opinion, I guess. Not just the court of law, in the court of public opinion. You can't even bring it up.
That's a fake reason. It's a reason not to discuss something that you can't even begin to defend, and be so disqualifying if anybody other than Trump did it that he wouldn't even know what to do. Which is why I said at the time, it's basically you're saying, Trump, the Fifth Avenue, Trump could shoot people on Fifth Avenue, and because it's a binary choice, is what he kept arguing, you'll have to support him. But in this case, he didn't even want to touch it because he came up with some rationale not to touch it. And the same thing with John Kelly. John Kelly, I know that Hugh revered John Kelly, a Gold Star father and a 4-star general. Tom Cotton's the one that suggested Trump hire him. So I wanted to ask him about what John Kelly said, and not really the Hitler stuff. That John Kelly said he's the most flawed individual that he's ever met. That John Kelly went on the record to Jeffrey Goldberg that hearing Donald Trump call those who died in battle losers. And Hugh said that he refuses to criticize a Gold Star father, so therefore he refuses to even discuss what John Kelly said. Well, that's a great rationale for not engaging something that is really concerning, which is what John Kelly said about the guy he worked for very closely for over a year.
Now, would you say you had a two-part answer to that? We just talked about January 6th. What was the first part?
Well, January 6th and then John Kelly. Both of those were, and then the first one was catastrophizing.
Okay, that's what I wanted to talk about, because I wanted to just admit something. So Mona Sharan wrote this great piece at the Bulwark where she kind of explained this interesting phenomenon whereby none of us can be experts on everything, right? And so what happens is you basically pick a team, and maybe it's because you're pro-life, so you pick the Republican Party, and you can't be an expert on everything, so you start to outsource to other experts that you trust, right? So if you're pro-life, but you hear Liz Cheney talk about how dangerous Iran is, and so you believe her, right? Because what am I going to do? Go investigate? It's like I don't know. And over time, you start to trust people and listen to people and build this kind of somewhat coherent or maybe incoherent worldview. And I think what Trump has done has sort of made us, those of us who we're starting to question everything now, because if they're wrong about this, maybe they were wrong about that. And so I think that's why you have some people who have just kind of flipped on everything. They've kind of abandoned all of their beliefs. Well, one of the things I have not done that, Jamie, as you know, but one of the things that I have done is
that was Max Boot's argument in his book about why he switched on the right. That's what he said. I kind of reject it. I think like if you're a columnist and you only are depending on like what a particular expert, because he's a conservative, says, you're not doing your job. I find that a really, really bad argument, and I'm sad that Mona's making it as well. It might make you question someone you once respected, but if you're really just relying because they're a supposed expert on the right on something, I didn't like Max Boot, but go ahead.
Okay, so I can tell you something that I did in the past, which was, as a conservative who couldn't possibly be an expert on everything, when they told me Bill Clinton, he's not just a liberal, he's a leftist, he's a left-wing radical. And if he becomes president, fill in the blank. I believe them. And then they said, Barack Obama, he's not just a liberal. He's a left-wing, radical, evil, I believe them. And now Hugh is telling me that Kamala Harris is. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Actually, Bill Clinton turns out to have been a fairly moderate Democrat in many ways. He did a lot of things I don't like, but Kamala seems like maybe an opportunist, maybe a careerist, but I think she said things that were radical and progressive in 2019 because she wanted to win the Democratic primary. It doesn't ring true to me. And in the olden days, I would have just trusted Hugh. Hugh's smarter than me. Hugh's older than me. He's been around longer than me. He, worked in the Reagan administration or whatever. I would have deferred to him because he's on my team and he knows more about this than I do. And I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know if the veil has been lifted, but I'm not buying it anymore, Jamie.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, personally, I always thought that was crazy. Usually I would get books every election cycle. Like, this is the worst president who's ever been. This was the worst. I remember Mark Levin, I reviewed one of his books. I did an interview with him. It was about, it must have been 2016, and how Obama was the worst of all time. He was Stalin. He was all this. And I asked him, because his son had become a multi-billionaire during the years that Obama had been there. I go, hey, oh, really? Can you point to any son of a critic of Stalin who became a multi-billionaire during the age of Stalin? That doesn't seem to happen. He couldn't be that bad. He can't be quite like Stalin. You're speaking, aren't you? Stalin would have you put in jail or worse.
Or worse, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cottage industry, I think, on the right and the left, for Republicans. But it doesn't seem like this will be the end of the world. Excuse me, especially if there's a Republican Senate, which I think there will be. And in fact, I don't know why a Republican billionaire like Ken Griffin, who wasn't very enthusiastic about Trump and is putting money to the Republican Senate. I don't know if he switched and started giving money to Trump, but like a national campaign ad that says, put $500 million behind it, nothing to these guys, that says, vote gridlock on election day. Vote Kamala Harris and your Republican Senate candidate.
Yeah, I think I'm going to write a column about that actual thing. My next column for the Hill will likely be the case for gridlock. Last thing I want to play. So I think,
Matt, but I think that is why Hugh knows that argument. That's why his focus is almost entirely on foreign policy. With his focus is real on foreign policy, because that's the one area where even if there is gridlock, or a president will have much more leeway.
Yep. Although, frankly, I don't want to. We could just go through the whole. Matt and Jamie discuss. We do an interview on the Hugh interview, and then someone could do one on our interview about the Hugh interview. But I think Kamala has more of a Reagan foreign policy, certainly as it pertains to Ukraine and Russia. I trust Kamala way more on Ukraine than I do Donald Trump and JD.
I don't really trust her that much on foreign policy. I don't think she'll pull out of NATO, which Trump might do, which is really bad. But I mean, I don't think her instincts on Israel, Gaza, I'm not super confident in those. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what her foreign policy is. I don't know if anybody really does. But I mean, I would be really surprised if I ended 4 years of her term and go, wow, she was, another Reagan or something like that. But we'll see, maybe.
Her rhetoric is better than Trump's. I'll put it to you that way. And don't tell me words don't matter. All right, I want to play this clip of Hugh Hewitt. Not with you, but the Washington, apparently he's resigned as a columnist from the Washington Post, but he was on with, I think it was Ruth Marcus and my friend Jonathan Capehart. And I think the lesson here, is that things are stressing right now is a dangerous time. People's nerves are jangly because we're so close to the election. And I think it's a time when people make rash decisions. And we'll play this clip and we'll talk on the other end.
Is it me, or does it seem like this week Donald Trump is laying the groundwork for contesting the election by complaining that cheating was taking place in Pennsylvania, by suing Bucks County for alleged irregularities. And this is on top of his continual assertion that if he loses, it's because of cheating.
Yeah, that's what he's been laying the groundwork for this, just not in the last week, but in the last umpty-ump months. No election can be fair in Donald Trump's mind, unless Donald Trump wins it. And I think we are going to see him both rev up his supporters to contest elections outside of courtrooms and go to every courtroom he can in America where it's relevant to make whatever arguments he can, no matter how far-fetched. We saw
Jonathan,
that
I've
work
got to
out
speak
last
up.
time, but it didn't work out
Ruth,
this time.
finish, Hugh.
It may not work. That may not happen this time. And now I'll let you go, Hugh.
Well, I've just got to say, we're news people, even though we're at the opinion section. It's got to be reported. Bucks County was reversed by the court and instructed to open up extra days because they violated the law and told people to go home. So that lawsuit was brought by the Republican National Committee, and it was successful. The Supreme Court ruled that Glenn Youngkin was successful. We are news people, even though we have opinions, and we have to report the whole story if we bring up part of the story. So yes, he's upset about Bucks County, but he was right, and he won in court. That's the story.
I'll let you keep going, Jonathan.
No, I don't appreciate being lectured about reporting when, Hugh, many times you come here saying lots of things that aren't
I won't
based
come
in
back,
fact.
Jonathan. I'm
But-
done.
but-
I'm done. This is the most unfair election ad I have ever been a part of. You guys are working. That's fine. I'm done.
So, Ruth, you wrote a column this week ending with this line, and actually, I think this is perfect. We're going to put it on the screen.
We can just
You want to know the stakes of this election? Not only democracy,
What goes
but
on,
decency.
it begins to freeze.
Talk more about that.
And he actually loses
Jamie,
her.
I hope
Okay, collect.
I hope you don't storm off the set after this.
Hugh's right. Hugh's right. I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like this ties to the Liz Cheney stuff that we talked about earlier with what Trump said, is that there's plenty of stuff that could have been said about Trump trying to lay the groundwork for election not being valid, that he and what Ruth actually did say there, that election's not fair if he doesn't win, without using an example as they did with Bucks County, which I didn't know about. I went back and looked at it after Hugh said it. Hugh was right. That is a case where the RNC sued and they won. You can't if you're news people, even if you're opinion side, you have to tell the full story. And
Okay.
he is right.
A couple things.
That
First,
is a real shame for Jonathan Capel.
I don't know the details about Bucks County, but there is an irony, I think, right? Which is to say, the big kind of Molly Hemingway argument about why 2020 was stolen it's not because people stuffed ballot boxes, right? The most serious argument is that in order to accommodate COVID, there were states that allowed voting, more, mail-in voting or early voting, things like that, right? And they didn't go through the proper channels of the state legislature. Well, in Bucks County, there was a law that early voting ends at a certain time or a certain date, and it ended. And now the Trump campaign is saying, well, you have to extend it, right? How am I wrong here? Why don't they follow the law? Which is
They won in court. So, I mean, clearly there was some issue that they were able to win on. I don't, I'm not saying they're consistent or honest, but they had a legal issue, which they brought to the court and won on it in court. Now, by the way, I want to say about that Molly Hemingway argument, it's one of those things where Trump makes an explicit claim in an argument, and then he goes to all these like secondary figures who write books explaining how he's right using something like on a differerent argument.
That's like a Mott and Bailey, I think they call it,
Trump,
right? Because
Trump's argument, was that he won more votes, and that Hugo Chavez helped him with the election rigging system. That's his argument. People want to make these. J.D. Vance does the same thing. I really wish one of the interviewers, this one interviewer from the New York Times gets credit because she kept saying it wasn't rigged. And J.D.'s making a different argument. She should have said, fine. Who got more votes on election day? Because that's what Trump said. Trump said he got more votes on election day, and people intended to vote. And I'd like to put JD on the spot and see if he will back up Trump or somebody else. But right now, he talks around them, and no one presses.
Yeah, they say outrageous things, and then when you press them on it, they retreat back to a more modest. Like, look, we're just saying that the rules weren't followed, and
But Trump doesn't. Trump is pretty explicit. Trump says he won on election day. He got more votes. More people came to the ballot to vote for him, and it was stolen on election day. He might resort to some of this stuff. The Hunter Biden type story, laptop story, was suppressed. That's not the root of it. That's not the main point of his argument. The main point is that on election day, Democrats stole his votes. He got more votes on election day. Molly wrote a whole book trying to come up with a different argument than Trump was making.
I agree. And so I guess my point is, even though a court may have found that Trump is right and Trump won as it pertains to Bucks County, that doesn't mean that they're not laying the groundwork to say the election was stolen.
Well, I think Hugh's point there, which I think is right, is that Jonathan Capehart, who was the host in this case, should have mentioned that, oh, by the way, this point where I'm showing you that they're laying the groundwork, Trump actually won the case.
Yeah.
I mean, at least give the full facts. There's plenty of other examples you could use, by the way, to show that Trump is lying. He's done posts on Truth Social trying to lay the groundwork. Tucker's speech at MSG, excuse me, is laying the groundwork. But to use an example where he won the case and not mention he won the case is a dereliction of duty, even for an opinion journalist.
For those who don't remember, Tucker at the Madison Square Garden basically said, there's no way Kamala could get 85 million votes. Everyone knows that she's a joke. There's no way. So it's sort of laying the groundwork that if and when she does get 85 million votes, he's planted the seed or laid the predicate that it's impossible because she's not that smart, or what. I forget what he said about her.
Yeah. I mean, he said no one like her could win the election and get votes. So we know it's fraudulent if she wins, which is, again, for a newly, someone who came back to his faith.
Yeah. Well, he's a baby Christian, though, Jamie.
What?
Jamie, you have to make allowance. Do you remember the baby Christian argument?
No. Who made that? Maybe.
This was said about, this is like a stupid inside joke, but it was said about Trump. This was the argument when, after Trump claimed that he had become a Christian, or that he was one, and then he would go say something horrible. And then, these evangelical leaders would explain it away by saying, well, he's a baby Christian. He's still growing. And I'm like, well, here we are. It's been 9 years.
Trump claimed at the same time that the IRS was auditing him in the primaries because he was a Christian. I don't think you would imagine they would audit. Baby Christians wouldn't be audited in the way that he was suggesting. And it must have been they're upset with his robust faith that they audited him.
So let me say something else about what Hugh did in that interview with Jonathan Capehart and Ruth Marcus, is I think he crossed the line. There's sort of an implicit agreement. You work for the Washington Post. You were participating with colleagues of the Washington Post in this interview. And I think it would have been perfectly fair if he would have, at a certain point, said, hey, guys, look, the court ruled that Donald Trump was right. And therefore, in this instance, I don't think your argument holds water. But Hugh didn't just say that. He was lecturing them on, he was basically publicly accusing his colleagues of being bad at their job. And to me, that crosses the line. That there's an implicit bro code or colleague code that you don't do that publicly. What do you think of that?
Probably right. Sometimes the truth is defense, though, I guess. I mean, maybe they are bad at their jobs. I don't really read Jonathan Capehart or Ruth Marcus, but I mean, look, I don't know if he should have done it. I doubt it was planned. But if it was planned, it would be brilliant, because I bet it's going to be one of the best things that ever happened to Hugh's career. He will almost certainly, if he's not a Fox News contributor yet, and I don't believe he is, will become a Fox News contributor. He writes a column also for Fox News. I wonder if that will expand. I think this is going to be a tremendous boon to Hugh. And I don't think it was planned, but maybe some people should plan certain things like that, because I think this will be great for Hugh's career.
And on that happy note, final thoughts, Jamie? Any you want to make a wild prediction? North Carolina goes to Kamala. What do you think?
I have no idea. I honestly have zero idea what's going to happen. I do believe we will survive either presidency, even though I do think the downside risk, the tail risk with Trump is great and it's worth not taking. But we're America, and we'll get on.
All right, my friend. Always a pleasure. Everybody make sure to check out the Dispatch Mondays, where Jamie is exceptional at interviewing people. Always a good listen. Jamie Weinstein, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thank you, man. This is great.